Welcome everyone to week 7. Try that again. Welcome everyone to week 7 of the Intro to HTML and JavaScript, as well as if you are taking the CIT class, CIT 160. I believe this is the week for exam 1. If I'm wrong about that, if I uploaded this too late or something, let me know. Please let me know so I can update my upload schedule for you guys to make this more beneficial for you. But so far I don't know. Right now, I think we're in week 7, and we're, at the end of the week, we're going to have an exam, or maybe the middle of the week. I'm not quite sure. And I'm a little late uploading this. I meant to do this on Saturday, and I just forgot. It got away from me. So I didn't do it on Saturday. I'm doing it today instead. But if you're not in the class, don't worry. We can still do the challenge, and we can talk about some things. But if you are in the class, yeah, let me know about that, and I hope this is helpful to you. If you're only here for the review, if you're here for just to review right before you go to the exam, or you want to like look at what kind of things you probably should think back on and look at, I'm going to put a timestamp in this video. It's going to be a chapter, and you can go to that review specifically if you don't want to talk about this assignment right here. Also, another quick note before we move forward, I am going to do another series right after this one ends. I'm going to go ahead and start working on it now, but right after this series ends, we're going to be doing a new series here on the channel, which is going to be about CSS. So for anyone that is interested in web development, interested in front-end work, which just means like browser, how the browser looks and things like that when you're interfacing with it and the buttons, that's all CSS and HTML and JavaScript. So this new, I don't know what I'm going to call it quite yet, maybe an intro to web development, but whatever it is, it's going to be focused more on CSS than it will be on HTML and JavaScript. Although we will still talk about HTML and JavaScript in that series, but we will be focusing on using your JavaScript on an outside. I can't remember the word. It's not inline, but there's a word to say that the JavaScript is inside your file instead of it being outside. So I'll be focusing on making an HTML file, and then making a JavaScript file, and then making a CSS file, and then linking all those together. That's mostly what I'm going to be doing in that series, and showing you how CSS works and how to make your website look really pretty. So that's pretty much it. That's all like the updates I have. So let's jump right in. Let's go into this assignment / challenge that we have for this week. You don't really need to know anything new for this one. I've basically talked about everything that you need to know. And this one isn't very hard as long as you know a couple of things. So let's talk about the kind of things that you're going to need to know. My nose itches really bad right now. Oh, good gracious. Okay. So what you're going to need is you're going to need a text box, and you're going to need a button that says whatever really you want. It could say go. Mine says go. That's what I put it as, is go. But this text box and then go. And so what you're going to want is you're going to want the user to type in a number. And when they hit the go button, you need to take in that number into your function, and you need to find all the odd numbers before that number up to 0, or down to 0, however you want to say that. I can probably say that a little bit cleaner. So say the user enters the number 5 into this text box. Let's change this to say in a number I can type. Okay, type in a number, and then they type in the number 5. What you want to do with your function up here is you want to take in that number 5, and then you want to count all the odd numbers up to 5, and then you want to add them all together. So someone enters 5 and hits go. What it's going to print out, it's going to print out 9, because you're going to take 1, 3, and 5, which they typed in 5, so 1, 3, and 5, and then add all those 3 together. So no matter what the number they enter, you want to be able to add in all the odd numbers up to that number. They enter 21, you want to do 1, 3, 5, 7, you want to keep going up and add all those together. Now there's a couple things I do want to point out and kind of remind you guys about that will make this a lot easier. The first thing is don't forget to use your while and if else loops. At least that's the way I did it. I used an embedded if else loop inside a while loop. So the while loop, you're using that. So another thing you don't want to forget is don't forget that the exclamation mark, what I just showed you right here, is a negating operator. It is a reverse, I guess you could call it like a reverse Uno card. It turns around whatever you're asking the program to do. So, for example, if you said, let's just erase the comments and we can actually write the actual program. So you could say something like, while, let's get rid of that for now. You could say while x is not equal to 6. So this is a while loop, and then you of course open your while loop with your brackets. Your while loop here saying x is not equal to 6. If you got rid of that and you put back the double equal, that means while x is equal to 6. But if you wanted to say something like, I want it to verify that every single number that is in x is not 6, anything other than 6, it cannot be 6, you would say not equal to 6. That negating operator is the exclamation mark. This becomes extremely helpful, and I'll give you a tip, a little thing about this, is one way that people try to find odd numbers, or not, well, they try to find not even or things like that, is they would take this number, x, and they would say, while x divided by 2 is equal to 0. This statement finds even numbers, okay? Because basically what's happening, this is a modulo operator if you've never seen it before. Basically what it does is it gives back a remainder. So normally you'd see something like this as a division symbol. That divides whatever's in x and 2, so x divided by 2. But if you put the modulo operator, that divides by 2 and then gives back or returns the remainder. I hope that's making sense. So if you have x is equal to 2, so x divided by 2 is 1, and it's a remainder of 0 because it divides evenly. So if you have this statement like this, anything that does not divide equally into 2 basically doesn't apply. Hope that's making sense for you. So if x is 3 and you divide that by 2, that does not divide evenly. Therefore, it is 3 divided by 2 is not part of this statement. You would use a statement like this to be able to find odd numbers or even numbers. For example, I probably wouldn't use a while loop for something like this. I would probably use an if statement for something like this. So it'd be like if x divided by 2 is equal to 0, then you can add x to a list or something. So imagine you have a variable up here on top that says like x. No, well, let's do x. Let's do count. Yeah, you can call it count. You can say like let count equals 0. And so you have this, let's actually do that correctly. There we go. Let count equals 0. Now count is this number that you can use to count your total, for example. So say we were looking for even numbers, we're looking for odd numbers at the moment, but say you're looking for even numbers, you could use this statement. If it's equal to this, if x, because we don't have x, but imagine we did have x, and x starts out as 0 or something like that, and x is divided by 2 is equal to 0, then you could take whatever x is and throw it into count. You could say like x, or sorry, not x, you'd say count plus equals x. That you could use to say like, okay, if x is 2 and you divide that by 2, that does divide equally. So therefore, take whatever is in x and put it in count, which means 2. So now count is equal to 2. And then you do it by 3. 3 does not divide equally, so we just skip this statement. What about 4? 4 does divide evenly. Okay, so take 4, which is an x, and put it in count. Now we have 6 in count. Now count is equal to 6. So now you're adding together all even numbers. I hope what I'm saying is making sense. But that's how you do that. So now remember the negating operator. Some people would say to find all odd numbers, I've seen people do it, they say like this. Now it would work, because if you had a 3 and you divided it by 2, you would end up with a remainder of 1. That is true. And for now, we're only working on even numbers. We're not working on, we're working on positive numbers, not negative numbers. But if we were working on negative numbers, this is not accurate. If you did like -3 divided by 2, you wouldn't end up with a remainder of 1. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's something different. It's a little off. You don't get quite the remainder of 1. So to fix this statement, instead of doing it like that, I would say, as long as it's not equal to 0, if whatever's in x divided by 2 does not return a remainder of 0, that will verify that even if it's a negative number, which we're not worrying about negative numbers right now, but even if it were a negative number, a -3, it would still function properly. You would still get the right answer. So I would do something like this. I would use a while loop to make sure that you ensure that you don't stop before you're finished and all things like that. But that's the basis idea of what you want. You want to be able to type in a number, hit go, and it print that out for you. Let me pull that up for you. Let me show you what it looks like when you run this program. I'm going to pull up the program that I made myself when I was in the middle of doing this for my class, just so you can see what I did with it. And I put in, like, this program is designed to take a positive number and add up all the odd numbers before it. So like I said, if you do 5 and you hit sum odds, the sum of all the odd numbers between 1 and 5 are 9, because it's 1, 3, and 5. If you type in 20, it should be able to take care of that as well. The sum of the odd numbers between 1 and 20 are 100. It should be able to hold and take care of all of the numbers that you could type in there. So think about that. Spend some time thinking about it. Have some fun with that. And if you need any help with that, you can always reach out and ask me. I'm always willing to help. But let's jump in now that we finished that challenge assignment. Let's jump into the review for the exam. Let me get a little drink of water first, because I've been talking for a minute. Okay. So a few things that you're probably going to want to remember for exam 1 that's coming up in CIT 160. So I would say the most important things, I'd say the most important things is your loops, your 3 different types of loops. And I'm going to go ahead and type those out for you so you guys can see them. But your 3 loops, if you remember, are for loops. I did not go out the way I expected it to. There we go. You have for loops. You have while loops. Why is that being weird? There, okay, it fixed it. Okay, that was odd. Okay, you have for loops, you have while loops, and you have the do while loop. All very good. Oh, not there, sorry. That's not where that goes. You see, you can tell I don't do whiles very often. Okay, so these are your 3 different kinds of loops. If you remember, your for loop, your while loop, and your do while loop. So your for loop, I'm going to go over a little bit of the syntax with you to try to review that. So remember that you only put semicolons in specific places. They don't go just anywhere. You do not put a semicolon here. That does not belong there. But for a for loop, this is your syntax. You could do something like let I equal 0. Whoops, 0. By the way, these things do not have to be spaced out. You could definitely erase all the spaces between here. It'll still work just fine. I just think it looks cleaner all spaced out. That's just a personal preference of mine. While I is less than 5, we'll do 5, excuse me, then I++. Okay, then you have your statement in here. And yes, there is a semicolon at the end of these statements that you put in here. You do put semicolons there, but you do not put them here, and you don't put them here. Like, you don't do any of that. You also put them here. Just beware of that. That's the only other place inside like a loop that you will put them. You don't put them in while loops. You don't put them in the do while loops, except for your statements, obviously, these statements. And I'll go ahead and put those statements in there just so that they are like placeholders. They'll just stay there for us. Okay, you do put them on the statements, but you don't put them anywhere else except for here. And these are because these are kind of like breaking statements. I don't really know how to describe why they're there. They just are. You may also get rid of this let if the I has been declared before. Like up here you say like let I, or you have put something in I before, then the let may go away. You may just keep it with just the I. But for just the, just for how I have it today, we'll keep it like this. But just beware, that's another way you can write that, and there's nothing wrong with that. So that's your for loop syntax. Remember, you always have the semicolons at the end of each one of these statements. You have 3 statements. You have a declaration statement telling you what variable you want to start at, I equals 0. Then you have a while this is true statement. It's kind of like while this statement still continues to be true, then keep going. And then after each loop, what do you do? And so it adds to the I after each loop. That's how the for loop works. While loop only takes in like one argument, basically just a statement saying is something equal to something, is it less than or more than something. You could say while I is equal to 6. That's one way you can write it. You can write lots of other stuff. You can also use a while loop to say while, say you have a variable named I. Yeah, we'll just use variable named I. If your variable I is a Boolean statement, then you can use while I to say what you're trying to say. So, for example, if I holds let's just try it here. We're going to say like let, if, whoa, that was not even close. Let I equal true. So now we have this statement here. Let I equal true. Now you can say while I. You're basically, this is a shortcut of saying while I is equal to true, continue. If I were ever changed to false, this while loop would never run, or it would run until you changed it to false. This is just a short way of saying while I is equal to true. You can say that as well. Or you can say I is equal to 6 if it's going to be equal to something else. And then you put your statement in here. Remember, once again, you don't put a semicolon there. You don't put one down here. It only goes after each and every statement here is finished. Okay, after you finish a statement. And if you happen to have I is less than 5, make sure somewhere along the line you have something to increment I. It can be here, that's fine. Just make sure somewhere, it doesn't even have to be inside this particular, like this specific while loop. It could be inside like an embedded while loop. It could be like while and then another while statement, and then you can plus plus inside that while. Just make sure that you're not going to get stuck in an infinite loop. If you don't put something like this I plus plus somewhere inside, you're going to end up being stuck in an infinite loop because I will always be less than 5 because you had it set to 0, for example, and you're never incrementing it. You're never making it more. So it's going to stay below 5 forever, and it will continue to loop. So just make sure you don't forget to have an incrementing statement that will, well, that's not what I wanted. An incrementing statement that will increase whatever your variable is, if this is how you're doing it. Do while is the exact same thing, basically, except the statement here comes first, and then you do the while loop. So if you wrote the same program, it would be like that. You know, and then you have your I++. So you just do the same thing, it's just kind of backwards. You do and then while. It just runs your code first, and then it checks to see if the statement is correct. So those are the things I would say to remember. Don't forget where your semicolons go. Remember that you should use parentheses. It does not matter if your parentheses are spaced out like that, or if they are together, that's fine. Also remember that in most of your textbooks and things like that, you are going to see it look like this. It's going to be an open bracket on the same line as the while loop, and it's going to be a closing below it like this. That's how it's going to appear more times than not in your textbooks. And therefore, it probably will look similar to that in your exam. So don't be freaked out. Don't think that this is an error, because it's not, to have it on the same line. You can make that happen. That's just not what I do. I put it on its own line. That's just a thing that I like to do when I write my code, but it's not necessary. I think that's pretty much it. Just remember these things about your loops, and just take your time when you do your exam. Take your time and think about what's going on. Do some desk checks while you're sitting there doing your exam. A desk check, if you guys don't know what those are, then that's totally fine. I don't expect you to know know all these things. A desk check is just basically where you sit there and you run through it in your head as if you are the computer. And you can even do it with a piece of paper if you'd like. This piece of paper you can set down in front of you. You can write it down. Write down what the computer is doing. So this is not very big or anything. It's not like I'm like looking at something huge. But if I were looking at it, I could be, you know, okay, while I is equal, or we'll do the for loop. Let I equal to 0, and then I is less than 5. And I'd be like, okay, well then I equals 0 right now. Okay, good. And then I'd look down at my statement. I'd be like, okay, this is what it's doing right now. Okay, it is taking I and putting it in another variable. I would say like plus equals I. Okay, and then I would look at this and I would say, this is my desk check. Okay, so I is equal to 0, good. It's still less than 5, that's good. Okay, and then I++, we'll do that at the very end. So you come down, you go let count plus equal I. Okay, I is equal to 0 at the moment, so count is still 0. Okay, then I plus plus. Okay, I is equal to 1 now. Is I still less than 5? Yes, it is. Okay, good. Okay, and then count plus equals I, so I is 1. Okay, 1. Okay, count is equal to 1 now. Okay, and then I is now equal to 2. Okay, I is still less than 5. Okay, good. And then you keep going like that. And you write that out on paper, or you can keep it in your head if you can, but that's a desk check. And then you sit there and you walk through it as a human to try to see if you can figure out or see what your code is doing. That was very helpful for me in my exams. I remember doing that frequently. I'd have like a piece of paper or something, or I'd just sit there and I'd think really hard. I usually did bring out a piece of paper though, and I'd write down what was happening. I would say, okay, so this is let I equal 0. Okay, that's good. And then I'd be like, oh, this is happening next. Okay, this is what's happening. Okay, that's what that variable holds. And that saved me quite a few times in these exams trying to understand what is going on. But if you guys have any questions for me, if you guys have anything specific that you guys want to ask about, something that you can think about that, hey, I have a specific question about how this works, or how, I'm always checking. I always try to check very frequently my comments and all those kinds of things, so that you guys can always reach out and ask questions. And if you want me to make another video to be more explanatory on anything, to be more explanatory on a subject or anything like that, I can go into more depth on some things, then yes, I will. I'll do that for you guys. But yeah, I think that's it from me. I think that's all I have to say. Good luck to you guys on that exam, and I hope you guys have a wonderful week.